Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mrs. Ross Does Math. Today's lesson is for Math 7. Our topic is Lesson 12. This is fractions, decimals, and percents. Now this lesson is the first to kick off our final unit of the school year. Yay! There are only 6 lessons in this unit, so we're going to get through them. We're going to finish the year strong, and you guys will officially be done. All right, so let's get this going. So to begin with, once again, this is for Lesson 12. This is in Math 7, and the topic, fractions, decimals, and percents. Here we go. Our essential question, how can I convert between fractions, decimals, and percents? That's what we're going to be focusing on. Now, just as a refresher, we do have one vocabulary word for this unit, and that is a percent. A percent is a ratio comparing a number to 100. Now, this past week, if I can get words, this past week I sent home a little insert, we'll say, that will go with these notes. Now, the insert for the majority of you has been completely filled out, and then there was a blank one as well. The one that's filled out is for a reference in case for any reason you don't watch this video. So I am going to be filling out a blank one for those who are. Now I'm going to set this to the side, and this is the insert. Yours will be white, mine is green. It's got all of these cute little sections on it. We've got fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions. We've got decimals to percent, percent to decimals, and we have percent to fraction and fraction to percent. Okay, so what I would recommend is making sure that you have all of these components here. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and get this started. Once we have this filled out, we'll go ahead and we'll add it into our notebook. It's a little bit bigger than the notebook, so I'm going to stick this in later. All right, so to begin with, we've got fraction to decimal. Now, when we take a fraction and we want to convert it to a decimal, we are going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So an example is, I have the fraction 4/5. Okay. Now I'm going to turn that into, wrong way. I'm going to turn that into a division problem. So I'm going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So here, my 5 is going to go on the outside, and my 4 goes on the inside. Now, 5 can't go into 4, so we're going to put a decimal on both the bottom and the top. We're going to put a 0 in its place, and we're going to put a 0 up top here. All right? So now I have 5 into 40. 5 can go into 40 8 times, so I'm going to put an 8 up top. 8 times 5 is 40. We get to subtract, and boom, we get 0. So our answer happens to be 0.8. All right? So that's how we can turn a fraction into a decimal. Now, to the opposite of that, turning a decimal into a fraction, we have a couple of steps. The first one is to remove the decimal. Second step, rewrite as a fraction. Third step, simplify. So let's say we have the decimal 0.20 or 20 cents, okay? 20 cents, I'm going to set this up, and I'm just going to drop that decimal, and I'm going to write it as 20. Now, if I have 20 cents, and I'm talking about dollars here, okay, 20 cents is a part of a dollar. Now, a dollar is made up of a dollar is made up of 100 pennies. So I can put my 20 cents over 100. We can also use the place value chart that we have from earlier this school year. So this is our hundredths column, so we can put 100 underneath. Next, we're going to simplify. Because they both end in a 0, we can cross out one of those zeros, and now we get 2/10. And 2/10 can reduce even further into 1/5, because 2 can go into 2 one time, and 2 can go into 10 5 times. So our final answer is 1/5. Next, let's go into decimals to percents. Now, decimals to percents is one of the easiest things that we can do, okay? We are going to begin by moving the decimal 2 places to the right, and then we're just going to add percent sign. So if I have the decimal 0.25, okay, I'm going to take my decimal point and I'm going to move it 2 places to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Now, that means that what I now have is simply the number 25. Because when my decimal goes to the end of it, I get 25 point something. Well, that point something is going to be point nothing, so I'm left with just 25. And when I do that, I now get to add a percent. So therefore, my answer is 25%. Now, if I had, say, 1.25, this would, once again, move 2 places to the right. But now, instead of 1.25, I have 125%. All right. Now, the opposite of that is percents to decimals. So when we go from a percent to a decimal, we begin by removing the percent. Then we're going to replace with a decimal. We're going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So here, let's say I have 36%. 36%, I'm going to drop the percent sign, leaving me with just 36. Now, where the percent sign was, we are going to go ahead and put a decimal. Now, I'm going to move that decimal 2 places to the left. So 1, 2. What that now leaves me with is 0.36. Now, anytime we've got a decimal in front of a number, we really like to have something here, so I'm going to put a 0 right there. So our final answer is 0.36. Okay. Now, lastly, we are going to begin by taking our percents and turning them into fractions. Now, when we have a percent and we're turning it into a fraction, we're going to put the number over 100. So we're going to turn the percentage into 100. Then we're going to simplify. And if we have a mixed number, it's the percent over 100. So just like we always have. Even if I have 125%, I'm still going to put my number over 100. All right? So here we go. So let's say we have 75%. Okay? 75%, I'm going to turn into 75 over 100. Now I'm going to simplify it. 75 over 100, it can be divided by 25 on both. So 75 divided by 25 gives me 3. 100 divided by 25 gives me 4. So my answer is 3/4. Now lastly, and the one that happens to be a little bit more difficult, is turning a fraction into a percent. So when we turn a fraction into a percent, we are going to begin by converting our fraction into a decimal by dividing. Then we're going to move our decimal 2 places to the right and add a symbol. So let's say I have the fraction, let's go 3/5. Okay, 3/5. Now I'm going to turn this into a decimal by dividing. So I'm going to go 5 on the outside, 3 on the inside. 5 can't go into 3, so I put a 0. Whoop, that becomes a 3. I bring down an imaginary 0. I put a decimal. 5 can go into 30 now 6 times, so 6 times 5 is 30. That closes out, so my decimal is 0.6. Now, my decimal is 0.6. So, I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Now, I've just created an empty spot here. So in that empty spot, I'm going to put a 0, and that's going to leave me with 60. And then our last piece, we're going to add a percent symbol. So we get 60%. So when we take a fraction and we turn it into a percent, that is us combining fractions, decimals, and percents all together. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and tape this page into my notebook. Okay, and I would highly recommend you do as well. This way we can keep track of it and we can revert back to it with any questions we may have. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get started with our assignment. So once again, our assignment is for lesson 12. This is Math 7, fractions, decimals, and percents. Please make sure that you write your name on both pages before you get started. I'm going to do that as well. This is for class period 2, and today's date is May 11th, 2020. So I'm going to write that on both pages. All right, so here we go. So we are beginning by writing each percent as a fraction in simplest form, and we're writing each as a decimal. So it's going to be a little easier, at least for me, to begin by transforming all of these percentages into a decimal. So starting out, if I have 75%, remember we drop our percent, we put a decimal, we move our decimal 2 places to the left, leaving us with 0.75. So our decimal version is 0.75. So that's one answer. Now our second answer is we need to turn each one of these into a fraction simplest form. Now anytime we talk about a percent taking each percent and turning them into fractions, it's our percent is over 100. So I'm going to have 75 over 100. 75 and 100 can each be divided by 25. So my other answer is 3/4. So in here, you should have two answers. So 0.75 and 3/4. And then we're going to circle both of those together. All right. Next, once again, we've got 50%. 50% as a write each percent as a fraction. 50% as a fraction is going to be 50 over 100 because we dropped the percent, we put 100 underneath. 50 is half of 100, so my fraction can be reduced to 1/2. Now, when we talk about turning each one of these into a decimal as well, we're going to drop our percent sign. We're going to put a decimal in its place. We're going to move the decimal 2 shades to the left, and we're going to be left with 0.50. So that is also my other answer. All right. Moving on, number 7, it says write each decimal as a percent. Now these ones are going to be a little bit more difficult, but once again, our clue here is we're turning each decimal into a percent, so we're going to move our decimal 2 places to the right, okay? So here, for 0.25, I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the right, which means it's after my number now, so this is just going to give me 25%. Now, let's say for number 8, we have 0.01. I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. When I do that, my decimal is after the 1. So I simply have 1% as my answer. All right, moving on. We've got number 13. We're going to turn each one of these problems into a percent. So each fraction turns into a percent. So let's take a look at what our directions state. It says convert to a decimal by dividing, move 2 places to the right for the decimal, and then add a percent symbol. So 50 over 100, we're going to reduce that. That becomes 5 over 10. 5 over 10 becomes 1/2. 1/2 as a decimal is 0.5. Now, when I move my decimal 2 places to the right, I get an empty spot here. I got to fill in that empty spot with a 0, so I end up with 50%. Now, let's go ahead and do, say, 2/5, case number 16. For 2/5, we've got 5 on the outside, 2 on the inside. 5 can't go into 2, so we're going to put a 0. 0 times 5 is 0, so we're going to subtract and we get 2. But now we have to bring down some of those imaginary zeros. So I'm going to put a decimal, and 5 can go into 20 4 times. So 5 times 4, that gives me 20. This clears out. So we get 0.4. Now we're going to need to move that decimal 2 places to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2. We create that empty spot here, so let's fill it in, leaving us with 40% as our answer. Okay. Now, if you are confused, need some extra time, please pause this video, go back through, review the notes again, do whatever you need to. Send me a message, or leave me a comment, send me a message, do whatever you need to do. All right? So, that is it for this. If you have any other questions, please contact me. I am here to help any way I can. Thank you so very much for watching. This has been Mrs. Ross Does Math.